Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CEOs and CMOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Rand Fishkin, co-founder and CEO of SparkToro, a market research and audience intelligence tool that helps its users to uncover the publications and people that influence their target audiences. Rand also was CEO and founder of SEO Moz and inbound.org. Hey, Rand, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ken. Good to be here.
Yeah, excited to do this episode with you. And just before we dig in, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe something not so obvious from your bio, and what you're trying to accomplish with SparkToro and how it fits in the environment that marketers find themselves in today?
Sure. I bet I can do all three of those things. Yeah. So you mentioned I am the co-founder of a few companies and currently the CEO of two businesses, SparkToro and Snack Bar Studio. Something you might not know if you haven't dug deeply into my background is I started a video game company with four co-founders last year. And that company is working on its first indie game. Hopefully it'll be out in about 2.5 years. It's a long process, but the video game is about cooking and foraging in a magical version of 1960s Italy. And I am a passionate home cook. In fact, this is not Italian, but I made classic Americana spaghetti and meatballs last night for a crowd of folks. And I'm looking forward to the leftover meatballs for lunch. I'll tell you that. They were great. You know what I did, Ken? I've never done this before, but I had some pistachios that I toasted and crushed up and put in the meatballs. Fantastic. Can't recommend it enough.
Well, we could start like a whole little bit of dark social around CMO cooking and recipes, right? Like we can find common ground on our love of cooking. Maybe we can solve some other problems too.
I mean, some folks have told me that my passion for uncovering search algorithms, which was my first job with Moz, my passion for uncovering dark social and audience research and understanding the world of attribution and zero-click platforms, which is a lot of what I do at SparkToro, and my love of cooking are all the same. It's breaking down recipe components. It's finding the right ingredients that make something work just right. And I think I am really an optimizer at heart, and that includes cooking, right?
Yeah, listen, I love cooking too. That's a different podcast, I think.
We have to be in the kitchen for that one.
That would be fun. I would go for that. I'm pretty passionate about it as well. Tell me just what SparkToro is and
Sure.
how it really fits into the environment marketers are finding themselves, because there's a lot of hair being pulled out, right? A lot of head scratching and hair being pulled out. So tell me what the problem space is that SparkToro is addressing and how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. So SparkToro is an audience research software tool for CMOs and CEOs who might be familiar with other audience research platforms. We really target small and medium businesses, independent entrepreneurs, founders, challenger brands, basically folks who cannot afford $50,000 to $100,000 a year to run large-scale surveys and pay for some of the more enterprise social audience research tools out there. And for folks who are not familiar with audience research, it's really simple, right? Audience research is essentially three things. It's interviews, surveys, and data at scale. And we really serve that data at scale problem. So for example, if you need to know what podcasts do architects in California listen to, because you want to do some advertising on podcasts, some sponsorships, SparkToro can tell you that. If you want to know what search keywords people who visit a particular website are searching for in Google, we can tell you that. If you are curious about what subreddits are popular in the indie video game space, we can tell you that too. So SparkToro is really designed to answer the question, where can I reach my audience outside of just Google and Facebook? And we help a lot of marketers, a lot of agencies and consultants to solve that problem.
And I think that's I want to unpack that just a little bit. It's really important as we're advising our clients. We're finding that we have this desperate seeking for things other than pay-per-click, other than Meta,
Yep,
other than LinkedIn, because those platforms seem less rewarding than they have been in the past. And it's like time to be a little smarter maybe about how
Yeah,
we.
we've done some research on this, Ken. I think you've seen some of our research specifically on this, right? Two things we did. We did a big study with Datos, which is a large clickstream panel. So they have, 15 million plus devices, right? Mobile and desktop, and they collect the clickstream, every URL that's visited. And using this panel, they can tell us all sorts of amazing things. So, we did a study looking at who still sends traffic out on the web, and is that declining? And the answer is it's approximately flat the last couple of years. So LinkedIn, Reddit, Twitter, Google, Threads. Well, Threads is actually growing, but that's because Threads itself is growing. But all of these places are sending relatively flat traffic, and more of it is going to the big websites. LinkedIn is sending a lot of traffic out, but a lot of that is going to YouTube, it's going to Google, it's going to the New York Times, it's going to The Verge, right? It's going to these big websites, and everybody else is left behind. Google themselves is sending more and more of their traffic to the big brands. You can feel the big brand dominance the last 10 years in Google. It's no longer a place where you can search and sort of find passionate amateurs and really interesting, unique websites. You're going to mostly see websites you've already heard of in virtually every space. And that is a little sad and frustrating from my perspective. But I think for a CMO, for a CEO, for a founder, for an agency, that means you have to be looking outside of the big platforms to try and find places to get your message in front of the right audience.
Yeah, and that's the challenge that I think we're facing. And I had a meeting with a CMO of a pretty big software company in the customer success space, saying just that she's frustrated with her agencies, with her own team. They're having trouble finding ways to get to their potential customers. And I think it's going to be a little back to the future here. We're going to be like doing real media planning again, as opposed to just the casino of search.
I actually think this is exactly how the future of marketing is going to play out. Look, the digital catalog of where you can place your message is vastly different than the 20th century. But I think a lot of the 20th century tactics and strategies that we abandoned for reach, for messaging, for brand building, and for measurement are going to see a return because we have lost access to so much attribution, especially when we talk about organic. If we're talking about paid media, there's still a decent amount of attribution that's possible. I don't think there's full funnel attribution. I think that is a complete myth. I don't care what econometrics model you've got that has AI in it. I don't believe you can truly capture word of mouth. I don't think you can capture mentions of your brand on a podcast. I don't think you can capture most digital PR. I don't think you can capture conferences and events. And those are huge places, especially in B2B, where path to purchase begins and happens. And I'm really passionate about this change, this going back to the past in order to have a better future, right?
Yeah, it's really the conclusion I came to just this week. So I've caught up with you, maybe.
We're on the same page.
We are on the same page. In looking at media plans for my current set of clients, I'm thinking I'd be better off in a subreddit. I'd be better off on a page serving the specific needs of an audience I'm trying to reach. In one case, it's physicians at the internship or fellowship stage. So that find them where they are naturally, as opposed to trying to find my way to them through search or other indirect means. They consume a lot of media and they congregate on a lot of websites by virtue of the work they're doing. So go where they are.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish at SparkToro, right? We want you to be able to go to SparkToro and search for, I don't know exactly what the word would be, physician or doctorate program might appear in their bio or something like that. And then you could see these websites have this affinity with that group. These YouTube channels have this affinity with that group. These podcasts, these subreddits, these search keywords, these social networks, these lifestyle brands. All that type of data, infuriatingly, is either incredibly expensive to acquire, or it requires a large-scale survey, which is either very expensive, or you have to already have the audience and be good at survey design and wait months. Casey and I, my co-founder, we were like, this is a frustrating problem for a ton of people. We should just make all of that available within a sub 30-second search. And that data is out there on the web, right? People publicly have profiles on places like LinkedIn and Twitter and Threads and Instagram and Facebook. And those public profiles tie to websites and behavioral data and demographic data using sources like clickstream data, right? The Datos panel. We're able to connect up these sort of behaviors and demographic activities and then form very credible, high quality sort of little mini panels every time you search, and get some pretty remarkable data out of that. I just don't think enough marketers are investing in this because I think too many CEOs and CFOs, frankly, insist, Ken, they insist that you have to prove attribution. And I think that model, that train left the station about 5 years ago. And it's just taking time for folks to catch up to the fact that because so few of these platforms send full data. Google used to send every keyword that every visitor searched for before they came to your website. No more. Facebook used to send a referral string that told you which post sent the traffic. No more. In fact, a bunch of Facebook's traffic is now dark social. They don't pass a referrer string at all. All those Slack communities, if you're in B2B, right? If you're in B2B SaaS especially, all those Slack communities where you know a ton of conversation is happening about your brand. People are recommending you. They're saying like, wow, this software is great. Look what I used it to do. They're telling these communities. Every single visit you get from Slack has no referrer string. It will not say even that it came from Slack, never mind which community. You are blind. And so what you think is happening is a bunch of direct traffic, right? Because all of that's going to be marked direct in your analytics. And then Google is getting credit for all the rest, because what happens? People search for your brand name in Google, and then your search team or agency or the brand team, they take credit for it. That's not what happened. Someone heard about your brand somewhere else. They came to Google, they searched for you. You just don't know where to attribute that properly. And these CFOs and CEOs aren't investing in the sources of influence that really reach their audience. That frustrates the heck out of me.
Well, I think that's a widely shared frustration. The CFO meeting is one of my least favorites.
Let me tell you, in my career, I have hired 3 CFOs, and I have been moderately happy with one of them.
That's on the right side of that conversation.
Yeah, maybe that's my fault for not doing a great job hiring, but oh my God, so much frustration.
You brought up Casey Henry, and he's your founding partner in SparkToro.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, this is a guy you worked with before at Moz and inbound.org.
It's true.
And for a founder that might be getting ready to go, right, has an idea, is getting ready to really assemble a team, how important is it to have these kind of known quantities on your initial team? And how much risk does it take out of a startup?
So I think knowing that you worked well together with someone in times of stress and on a variety of types of projects, which is what you'll face in an early stage company, I think that's a blessing. And I'm not sure it can work for everyone. I will say, for example, at Snack Bar Studio, my other company, I hired an art director and lead artist as a founding partner who I'd never met before. We talked several times on video, and we worked together on some projects for about 3 months before we brought this person on fully. I did get to meet him. We got to spend a week in a farmhouse in Umbria, all working on the game together, which was pretty great. But that I think is risky. It's a risky proposition. And I think if you can build a sort of network of people who you know and trust, and then find the right skills and passion and complement to your own missing skill sets, which is something I certainly need, right? I have no skills in the video game world. The only thing I can do is raise money and hopefully competently run the business, make sure that we don't run out of money, and do a good job of marketing, right? That's most of my input. But I have to hire technical people for every other skill set: the game designer, the artist, the lead developer, the writer. And the same is true with SparkToro. I did not have the technical knowledge or ability to be able to build this company on my own. And so I needed someone that I could absolutely trust and rely on, that I knew I worked well with, who had the same sort of values and motivations around the business that I do. And Casey was a wonderful fit for that.
Yeah, maybe also we should be coaching if there are like earlier career people who are listening that you have to collect your people, right?
Yeah,
As
it's
you move
beautiful.
through, right, as you move through your career, you got to collect people who you really enjoy working with. You have some shared values and worldview, and you never know how they might come back later in your career because it was some time ago that you started working with them.
Yeah, I think it's truly one of the best things about the professional world overall is building friendships, right? Friendships that can last for years and decades. A lot of people talk about making friends at work. I think perhaps the only sadness of the remote work movement, which I myself am a huge proponent of. I work from home on both my businesses. We don't have an office. We get together for both SparkToro and Snack Bar, maybe twice a year each, right? Spend some time together in person. So I love remote work, but I do worry about, will people be able to build the same network if they are remote and working from home? And my hope is that professional events, where you and I met, right? We met in New York at the Ascent conference. We got to have that really fun podcast with all the people gathered around the table, right on the balcony there in Times Square. And I think that sort of thing, right? That building of connectivity between human beings is, it doesn't happen online as easily as it happens in person. And I just think there need to be a lot more conferences and events, frankly, in almost every field. And I think more folks need to go, and more businesses need to invest in their talent and send people to these. I know that a lot of CMOs, for example, worry about sending their marketers to a marketing conference because they think, gosh, what if they meet someone there and get poached? And my response is always the same, which is, when they go there, they are building their network of people who can be valuable to them and answer questions for them and solve problems that can't be solved inside your organization. They are learning things and getting passionate about things that they probably never would have otherwise. They're coming back with ideas and creativity and that fire and spark. I don't know if you've listened to a session on stage and then been like, oh my God, I should do that. And then you go back and you just furiously pound it out. I do that all the time. I use conferences as like fuel for my fire. And I think missing out on that is such a cost that it is far, a far greater loss than the potential poaching of someone on your team.
Yeah, and you know what? They might also find people that end up recruited into the organization, right?
It works both ways.
Absolutely does. That's very cool. I'm big on the in-person events too. It was a great loss during the the thick of the pandemic, and it's something I really enjoy doing now, going out, having in-person meetings, whether small or large. They're
Yeah,
just,
same.
and I think a lot of business gets done there or gets influenced in ways that may be hard to identify and defend
Yeah.
to the CFO again, but I think it's important.
I mean, look, this stuff is not all just measurable cost and return on investment that can be put neatly into a spreadsheet. If you believe that, you are much more likely to be an AI than a human being.
I mentioned that I had this meeting with this SaaS CMO, and she had a lot on her mind. And one of the things was the state of content marketing and
Mm.
the need for thought leadership, like real thought leadership, not product push. But she was frustrated because it's hard for her to get this stuff in the hands of people who might care. And whether it's organic or paid traffic. So the question really is, what's a SaaS CMO to do to get their message in front of the right people at the right time? How do we get that great thought leadership in the right hands?
Yeah. So I think, first off, I think that's a valuable goal. And I would say a couple things are true. One, it cannot happen overnight. It doesn't happen with new brands and new websites quickly. I think actually it's slower than it's been in the last 20 years of the internet's growth, because established brands and established voices in almost every sector already exist, and a lot of attention is sucked up by those already paid attention to people. So breaking in is hard, but that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. And if you are willing to make a long-term investment, a real commitment, 2-year commitment, 3-year commitment to building up a voice inside a particular sector or an industry, I think it can be done. The other thing I would strongly urge you to do is when folks talk about thought leadership, they often think of it as blog posts and articles and social posts that are around topics that might resonate and get a bunch of whatever amplification on social platforms. I think what I would generally argue is that you have to reconceive of the audience you are attempting to reach when you create that and make a product for that audience that targets them uniquely. Here's what I mean by that. The audience for your products or services, whatever you sell, that is going to be different than the product for potential amplifiers. So potential amplifiers are people who would invite you on their podcast, reporters who would cover you, journalists who'd write about you, bloggers who would link to you and talk about you, folks with influential LinkedIn accounts or an influential YouTube channel or an influential Threads account or Twitter, if anyone's still on there. Those types of people have different wants, needs, and preferences than your customers. And one of the things I see so often is, especially in SaaS, especially in B2B, people not picking up on that, right? Consumer brands, a lot of consumer brands seem to get it. They get that amplification is not the same as selling the product. And so they lean into humor and celebrity stuff and creativity and brand building and sponsorships and charity and crossover stuff. Awesome, right? That's really creative and it often works. You can see it pop. On the B2B side, it worries me that people don't invest in the same way. Here's what a few things I would urge people to do. I think that research, unique research that you conduct yourself that comes from data you have or data you're willing to collect or fund to collect, beautiful, works incredibly well. I think that building a platform that reaches a bunch of the audience, for example, your own in-house podcast, your own in-house YouTube channel, your own in-house conference and event, but it can't be about pushing your product. It has to be about reaching amplifiers, being useful and interesting to them. And that often means getting outside of your comfort zone. I also would urge all these folks to think about having an enemy. I mean that seriously. I think that content that takes no controversial positions tends to fall very flat. And the enemy can be an old way of doing things. It can be an industry standard. It can be a big tech company. It can be, we think LinkedIn is terrible about this thing, and we're going to help you solve that problem by sharing all of these tips around it. Does that tie directly to our business? No, not really. But because we do a lot of activity on LinkedIn, we're going to help solve this problem. I really urge folks to be willing to be controversial, be willing to take a stand, to make some people mad, right? Piss some people off. That type of content is going to be far better received by these amplifiers than by your customers.
Hey, we talk about it's always good to have a villain in your
Yes.
life. It's very good to have a villain. And for a lot of companies, it can be the spreadsheet, right? It's completely defenseless. So nobody's banging the drum in defense of spreadsheets. So if your solution replaces spreadsheets, go at it. I'll share for the first time some new marketing from our agency. We are going to be going after and villainizing those who do nothing, the people who do not make decisions, the people who say no. We're not going to put in that new piece of software. And we have a persona, we're calling them the Chief Do Nothing Officer. And we are going to build a campaign around do nothing. And so I totally agree with you. This just came out of our own offsite. We actually had everybody fly in for an offsite.
Yeah, brilliant.
Or an onsite, I guess. Everybody's offsite all the time.
Yeah.
So absolutely, a villain is a really powerful positioning tool in my mind. And I guess we're on the same page again. So I think that's a great piece of advice. And we'll bring that forward more consistently because I think that's an evergreen bit of advice. We can always find a way to villainize something that's defenseless. moving on a little bit, tell me what you think about the proliferation of AI generated and AI assisted content and what it means for the near term ROI in content marketing. And what do we as marketers need to do in the face of that to earn trust? Because I feel like it's the AI generated content is maybe deteriorating the quality and the trust that goes with it. Did I just serve you a softball there?
Yeah, a very soft one. I think here would be my position. I think you should encourage all of your competitors to use nothing but AI generated content.
Maybe we should leave it there.
Simple, succinct. That's all it takes.
Fair enough. Maybe we'll move on. This is also going to be a little fun, but let's talk about where we are with SEO today. I saw you comment on a recent contentious post about changes to search algorithms. You've been pinged relentlessly today over news about some leak of the Google API and their internal position on search versus what they've been telling folks. So what's your take? What's the hot take on the news today? What can we learn from this?
Yeah, Ken, I think part of my afternoon today is going to be spent breaking down and trying to message to some folks, probably with a video, what exactly marketers might do differently after learning things from this leak of Google's warehouse API, content warehouse API, which for folks who might not be familiar, an anonymous source reached out to me about a month ago and shared some very surprising and insider bits of knowledge and detail that they said they had gleaned from a combination of documents and interviews with Googlers and ex-Googlers. And I was quite skeptical. And then they shared this document leak with me on Friday. And I sent it to a friend of mine, Mike King, the founder of iPullRank, who runs a very technically focused SEO agency in New York. And we spent the weekend analyzing it, put out posts on Monday night that shared a bunch of the details. And then yesterday was reporters and journalists covering it and top of tech meme and all that kind of stuff. And today is lots more of that. And so it's been a very busy time, but I think my current take on it, I would read Mike's post and our post on SparkToro about the leak. If you are looking for sort of a salient takeaway, one of the early things that I found particularly fascinating was how Google thinks about links, which is detailed. It's a little convoluted, but it's detailed in the API documentation that essentially pages that do not receive much traffic from Chrome browsers, and they have a bunch of ways to validate whether a Chrome browser belongs to a real human or not. Those pages don't pass value in their links, right? They don't pass PageRank, they don't pass anchor signals, which Google kind of calls the topical PageRank. They're not helping you to rank better. And so if you are someone who's at link building in a classic kind of way, how do we get lots of links from lots of different domains and pages and old pages? And hey, will you update this old page to make a mention of me, point to our website? That might not be very worthwhile. And instead, being in articles and news publications and people who regularly publish and regularly get lots of traffic to their published sites and pages, that's where the link value is, right? So I would probably refocus my attention and energy in SEO from sort of old school style, get the link wherever you can, to, hey, let's get links from pages that get clicks. That's one of probably 100 takeaways that you could get from this documentation.
I think maybe for B2B marketers, one of the things to look at is revisiting media relations, right?
Yes.
Media relations has been a tough game, tough to justify. Some of those tough CFO conversations I've had have been around PR and media relations.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps that's one of the takeaways is revisiting the value of earned media, true earned media.
Well, one of the other things that's mentioned in there is there's a good bit of discussion, and you can validate this across other things, patent applications, things that Google's publicly talked about, leaks from the DOJ trial, and not leaks, but rather information that came out during the Department of Justice lawsuit against Google and what their engineers were forced to stay on the stand. Authors matter a lot, and authors carry weight and authority with them as they go from place to place. And so if I were a B2B marketer, I am a B2B marketer. What am I saying? Here's one of my big takeaways. Don't let Amanda go anywhere else, right? My VP of marketing, Amanda Natividad, writes wonderfully. She has an authentic and well-recognized voice in our industry. And it's almost certainly the case that if she were to take her voice out of our platform and go somewhere else, SparkToro would lose a lot of value and potential value from that in Google's consideration. If I were the Washington Post, or I were Business Insider, or I were The Verge, I'd be thinking, oh, shoot, this is another reason I really need to work hard on retaining my content creators, especially the ones who have a notable voice and presence in the field. Probably a good thing to invest in recruiting those folks, building up their, profiles and search characteristics, and turning them into authorities in your field.
That's a great piece of advice. I love that one. Last thing I want to ask you before you go, any predictions on the impact of AI in content marketing? What are we going to be talking about at the end of the year? Like, where would you place your chips as the end of year conversation?
I don't think that much is going to change between now and the end of the year. I really don't. Ever since this sort of AI revolution came out at the end of 2021, sorry, I think it's been a 6 months from now, these AIs are going to be so much more powerful. They're going to be able to do so many more amazing things. And yeah, they do get a little better. I can't argue that, right? Like, the image generation is definitely better than the first version that came out a few years ago. It's interesting to see video that's coming out. It's interesting that ChatGPT 4.0 is a good bit better than 3.5 was. Those are all fine things, but have not seen revolution. I've seen evolution. And it is really similar to me. You know what it reminds me of, Ken? It reminds me of when Lotus Notes and Microsoft Excel came out. I was a baby. I don't really remember this,
Hey,
but
I was there, man.
you were there. You were there.
I was there then.
Right. And essentially it was this like, oh my God, we can do so many things inside spreadsheets, right? The emergence of spreadsheets and databases that can be used by any consumer and understood by anyone. You spend a little time with them, you get to know them, they work well. That was a revolution in how knowledge work could be done. No argument. And I think AI is very similar. But did it kill a bunch of jobs? Did people no longer need to be creative? Was there no longer any human input required? No, none of those things were true. And I don't think it's true this time either. Every time I see Sam Altman say, oh, AI is going to replace the need for all electrical engineers. It will replace the need for all software developers. It'll replace the need for all marketing functions. Okay, sure, buddy.
We're going to call BS on that.
Yeah, it just, come on, get out of here. That's not, I don't buy it for a second. I don't think, I think I published this on LinkedIn. I don't think 10% of marketers are going to lose their job over anything AI can do in the next 10 years. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd put money on that. I think I agreed to put a $5,000 donation to charity if it ends up being the case. I might have said 5 years in my post.
Well, I tell you what, I'll put up $1,000 for that. All right. So now we got $6,000 for charity.
$6,000 riding on less than 10% of marketers will be unemployed because of things that AI directly replaces their jobs with in the next 5 years.
I'm in. Hey, Rand, thanks so much for appearing today on SaaS Backwards. If people want to learn more about SparkToro or to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so anyone can sign up for a free account. We don't have a free trial. It's just forever free account. You can play around with SparkToro. You can see what it does. If you like it, there's options to upgrade to get more data. That's at sparktoro.com. If you want to learn more about the video game we're making, that's at snackbarstudio.com. And if you want to follow me, I am most active on Threads, where I'm at Rand de Ruyter, my married name, my wife's last name, and also very active on LinkedIn, where I'm Rand Fishkin.
Awesome. People want to reach me on LinkedIn/in/Ken Lempit. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please do so wherever you get your podcasts. And we also now have a new YouTube channel, trying to get some of that Google juice while it's still available to mere mortals. And thanks so much, Rand. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ken. Thanks for having me.